The morning sky above New York City turned dark without warning. Children stopped playing in Central Park and pointed upward. Office workers pressed their faces against windows. Traffic came to a complete stop as drivers got out of their cars to stare. A ship hung in the air above the city. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The massive vessel stretched from Manhattan to Brooklyn, its surface smooth like polished metal. Strange lights pulsed along its sides in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Elena Vasquez was drinking coffee in her small apartment when her phone started buzzing with emergency alerts. She was a language expert who worked for the United Nations. The messages all said the same thing. Report to headquarters immediately. First contact situation. Elena had trained for this moment her whole career, but she never really believed it would happen. She grabbed her emergency bag and ran to the street. Above her, more ships appeared in the sky. They were smaller than the first one, but still enormous. Within an hour, similar ships appeared over every major city on Earth. The ships did nothing for 3 days. They just waited. Governments around the world went into emergency sessions. Military forces went on high alert, but their weapons seemed like toys compared to the alien vessels. Scientists tried to communicate using radio signals. The ships received the messages but did not respond. On the 4th day, everything changed. Elena was in the UN building when the first ship sent down a beam of light. The light touched the ground in front of the building and began to form shapes. Slowly, the light became solid and created a platform. On the platform stood 3 beings that were clearly not human. The first being looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was tall and thin, with surfaces that caught light and threw it back in rainbow colors. When it moved, small pieces of crystal grew and broke off like breathing. The second being was covered in what looked like metal scales that shifted colors constantly. It had 4 arms and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. Its mouth moved, differently than a human mouth when it tried to speak. The third being was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of flowing liquid that held the shape of a person. Parts of its body were transparent while other parts were solid. When it walked, small drops fell from its feet, but then flowed back to rejoin the main body. The crystal being stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. Its voice sounded like music mixed with the ringing of bells. "People of Earth," it said, "we are representatives of the Galactic Council. I am Ambassador Zethkar. We have traveled far to meet you." Elena and dozens of other UN workers watched from behind protective glass. World leaders joined the meeting through video calls. Everyone held their breath. "We represent 847 different civilizations from across the galaxy," Zethkar continued. "For over 50,000 Earth years, we have guided species from worlds like yours into a better way of life. Today, we offer the same gift to humanity." The ambassador gestured with one crystalline hand. The air above the platform shimmered and showed images of amazing things. Cities that floated in the clouds. Ships that could travel between stars in days instead of years. Medical devices that could heal any injury or disease instantly. "We offer you immediate membership in the Galactic Council as Tier 3 citizens," Zethkar said. "This membership comes with many benefits." The images in the air changed to show more wonders. Machines that could create unlimited clean energy. Technology that could turn dead planets into garden worlds. Libraries containing the knowledge of thousands of civilizations. "Your people will live for 500 years or more," the ambassador explained. "Disease will become a thing of the past. Hunger will end forever. War will be unnecessary. You will have access to technologies that will seem like magic to you now." Elena watched the faces of the world leaders on the screens around her. She saw wonder, hope, and excitement. Some were crying with joy. Others were asking their advisors to confirm they were really seeing this. "What do you want in return?" asked the Secretary General of the United Nations. Zethkar's crystal body seemed to brighten. Very little. You must simply agree to join our system of government. Individual nations will no longer be necessary. You will be governed by the Council's Unified Governance Protocol, which has brought peace and prosperity to countless worlds. The alien showed more images, planets where all beings lived in harmony, societies where no one fought or argued, cities where everything ran perfectly and efficiently. You will also need to undergo cultural optimization, Zethkar continued. This process will remove the traits that cause conflict and suffering. Things like excessive competitiveness, tribalism, and destructive creativity will be gently corrected. These traits served you well when you were a primitive species, but they will only cause problems in galactic society. Elena felt something cold in her stomach when she heard those words. She was not sure why, but something about cultural optimization sounded wrong to her. "How long do we have to decide?" asked the President of the United States. "We are patient," Zethkar replied. "We will give you 1 Earth month to discuss this among yourselves, but understand that this offer has never been refused. Every species we have approached has seen the wisdom of joining us." The ambassador's tone became slightly harder. "We should also mention that the galaxy can be a dangerous place for species that choose to remain isolated. The Council provides protection from many threats. Without our protection, primitive civilizations often face difficulties." The meeting continued for several more hours. The aliens answered questions about technology, government, and what life would be like under Council rule. But Elena noticed they did not like certain questions. When asked about what happened to species that said no, they gave vague answers. When asked about what cultural optimization really meant, they said it was too complex for humans to understand. Yet, after the aliens returned to their ship, Elena walked through the streets of New York. The city was full of celebration. People were dancing and singing. News reports showed similar scenes around the world. Humanity had been offered a place among the stars. But Elena was not celebrating. She kept thinking about those words. Cultural optimization and never been refused. She thought about the way Zethkar's voice had changed when talking about species that remained isolated. That night, Elena sat in her apartment and looked up at the alien ship floating above the city. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She thought about all the amazing things the aliens had offered. No more disease, no more war, no more hunger. It sounded like paradise. So why did she feel so afraid? Elena opened her laptop and began to type. If humanity only had 1 month to decide, she was going to use that time to ask questions. Important questions. Questions about what had really happened to those species that had joined the Council. Questions about what cultural optimization actually did to people. Questions about what happened to civilizations that said no. She had a feeling that the answers would not be as wonderful as the aliens wanted humans to believe. But Elena was going to find out the truth, even if no one else wanted to hear it. Outside her window, the alien ship hummed quietly in the night sky, waiting for humanity's answer. Dr. Sarah Chen had always been curious about other cultures. As a xenoanthropologist, she studied how different societies developed and changed over time. When the aliens arrived, she was one of the first scientists called to help understand them. But instead of just studying the aliens themselves, Sarah decided to study their history. The Galactic Council had given humanity access to some of their historical records as a sign of good faith. Most people were too excited about the technology to read boring history files. Sarah was different. She spent 18 hours a day reading through translated documents about species that had joined the Council over the past 50,000 years. What she found made her stomach turn cold. Every species had the same story. First contact, amazing offers of technology and long life, cultural optimization. Then, nothing new. Sarah pulled up the records for the Vorthak, a species that joined. the Council 3,000 years ago. Before joining, they had been incredible artists. Their paintings and sculptures were so beautiful that other species traveled across the galaxy just to see them. But after cultural optimization, the Vorthak stopped making art. They only created things that the Council approved. Their new art was technically perfect but had no soul. The Kethmori had been famous explorers. They had discovered more new worlds than any other species. After joining the Council, they stopped exploring. They said they had everything they needed, and saw no point in looking for more. The Zelani had been brilliant inventors. Every few years, they created something that changed how everyone in the galaxy lived. After optimization, they stopped inventing. They only built things using Council-approved designs. Sarah found hundreds of examples, species after species that had given up the very things that made them special. They were all happy, healthy, and safe, but they were also empty. While Sarah was reading history, Captain Marcus Rivera was studying the alien ships from a military perspective. As the head of strategic planning for Earth's combined defense forces, Marcus had access to the most advanced sensors humanity possessed. What he saw worried him. The alien ships were incredibly powerful, but their technology seemed old. Not old, like ancient, but old, like unchanged. Marcus could tell that the basic designs were thousands of years old. The aliens had made the ships bigger and more efficient over time, but they had not created anything truly new. Marcus had seen this pattern before in human military history. When armies became too comfortable and stopped adapting, they became vulnerable to enemies who still knew how to innovate. He called his friend David Kim, who worked at NASA designing new spacecraft. "David, I need you to look at something," Marcus said. "I'm sending you sensor data from the alien ships. Tell me what you see." David spent 2 days analyzing the data. When he called Marcus back, his voice was troubled. "This is strange, Marcus. Their technology is amazing, but it's also predictable. Everything follows the same basic patterns. There's no creativity in the design. It's like they built these ships using a recipe instead of actually engineering them." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Human ships are messy," David explained. "Every designer adds their own ideas. Every builder finds new ways to solve problems. These alien ships are too perfect, too uniform. It's like they were all built by the same mind." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Or the same computer. Meanwhile, around the world, something unexpected was happening. Instead of celebrating, many humans were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. In Tokyo, a group of artists held a meeting about what cultural optimization might mean for human creativity. They remembered how different human art was across cultures and time periods. They wondered if optimized humans would still be able to create music that made people cry, or paintings that made them think about life in new ways. In São Paulo, a philosophy professor named Dr. Maria Santos was giving lectures about the value of human conflict. She argued that disagreement and competition were not flaws to be fixed, but engines of progress. Without people who think differently and argue with each other, we would still be living in caves, she told her students. In Mumbai, a teenage programmer named Raj Patel was trying to understand how the alien technology worked. He noticed that all their systems seemed to be run by artificial intelligence. The aliens themselves seemed to follow protocols rather than making independent decisions. "It's like they're not really in charge of their own civilization," Raj told his friends. "The computers are running everything, and the aliens just do what the computers tell them to do." These conversations were happening everywhere, in coffee shops and universities, in online forums and neighborhood meetings. Humans were doing what they had always done best, asking awkward questions and refusing to agree with each other. Ambassador. Zethkar was not pleased with humanity's response. The crystalline being had overseen the integration of 47 species during its long career. None of them had ever spent so much time arguing about the offer. Most species were so impressed. by the Council's technology that they agreed immediately. A few asked for time to prepare their populations for the transition, but humans were different. They seemed more interested in asking questions than accepting benefits. The humans are being unusually difficult, Zethkar reported to the Council leadership during a secure communication session. They are studying our records and questioning our methods. This is not acceptable, came the reply from the Council's central command. No species has ever taken more than 2 weeks to accept our offer. The humans have been deliberating for 3 weeks already. Perhaps we should provide additional incentives, suggested another council member. We could offer them advanced weaponry to help them feel more secure. No, Zethkar said firmly. Weapons would only encourage their aggressive tendencies. We need them to understand that their current way of life is primitive and inefficient. The ambassador decided to visit Earth's leaders again. This time the message would be less friendly. Zethkar appeared at the United Nations building without warning. The crystal being's body was dimmer than before, and its voice had a sharp edge that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. We have been patient with your deliberations, the ambassador said, but the Council is beginning to question humanity's wisdom. Every day you delay is a day that your people continue to suffer from disease, aging, and conflict. The Secretary General tried to explain that humanity needed more time to understand such a big decision. Time? Zethkar's voice became colder. You speak of time as if you have unlimited amounts of it. But consider this. While you debate, children on your world are dying from diseases we could cure instantly. Wars are being fought that we could prevent. Your people are aging and dying when they could live for centuries. The alien paused and let those words sink in. We have also noticed that some of your people are asking questions about our past methods, Zethkar continued. This concerns us. Primitive species often misunderstand the necessity of certain historical actions. The galaxy is not a safe place for those who refuse to evolve. Sarah Chen was watching the broadcast from her office. When she heard those words, she felt ice in her veins. The ambassador was making a threat, and it was not subtle. That night, Sarah, Marcus, and a dozen other scientists and military leaders held a secret meeting in a secure government facility. They shared what they had learned about the Council's history and methods. I think we're in serious trouble, Sarah said. I've been reading about species that refused the Council's offer. 3 species in the last 50,000 years said no. Their planets are now mining colonies. Their populations are gone. Marcus nodded grimly. And I don't think we can fight them with conventional weapons. Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. But maybe that's not the only way to fight, said Dr. Kim, the NASA engineer. Their technology is advanced, but it's also predictable. They think in patterns. Humans? We don't think in patterns. We think in chaos. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and diplomats. All of them were afraid, but none of them were willing to give up without a fight. We need to find out more about what happened to those species that refused, Sarah said. And we need to prepare for the possibility that we're going to have to say no to paradise. Outside, the alien ships continued to wait in the sky above Earth's cities. But now they did not seem like gifts from heaven. They seemed like threats, wrapped in beautiful packages. Humanity was about to face the hardest choice in its history. Sarah Chen had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at her computer screen, but she could not stop reading. She had found something in the Council's historical records that made her blood run cold, hidden deep in the files. About optimization procedures was a technical document that had not been properly translated. Sarah had taught herself to read the Council's original language, and what she discovered changed everything. The document was titled Cognitive Diversity Harvesting Protocol. Sarah read it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly. Then she called Marcus Rivera. You need to get over here right now, she said, and bring everyone from our group. I found something that explains everything. 2 hours later, 12 of Earth's top scientists and military leaders were crowded into Sarah's small office. Sarah's hands were shaking as she pulled up the document on her screen. The Council doesn't just optimize away human traits like creativity and competitiveness, she said. They harvest them. The room fell silent. Dr. Kim leaned forward. What? Do you mean harvest? Sarah pointed to a diagram in the document. Before they optimize a species, they scan their brains and record all the neural patterns that create what they call chaotic thinking. They copy everything about how unoptimized minds work. Then they feed this data into artificial intelligence systems. Marcus felt sick. You're saying they steal the way people think? Exactly, Sarah said. The Council's technology isn't stagnant because they're lazy. It's stagnant because they've been using the same AI systems for thousands of years. But those systems are powered by the creativity they steal from new species. Sarah pulled up another file. Look at this timeline. Every major technological breakthrough in Council history happened right after they optimized a new species. The Vorthak's artistic abilities were turned into AI that designs their cities. The Keth Mori's exploration instincts became navigation systems. The Zilani's inventiveness powers their manufacturing. Dr. Santos, the philosophy professor, felt rage building in her chest. They turn civilizations into farms. They harvest the very things that make species unique and then leave behind hollow copies of what those people used to be. It gets worse, Sarah said quietly. She opened another file. I found records of 3 species that refused the Council's offer in the past 50,000 years. The Corvani, the Hiteki, and the Duran. She showed them star charts. Where those species' homeworlds used to be, there were now mining operations and research stations. The Corvani were warriors who valued honor above safety. The Council offered them peace and long life. When they refused, the Council declared them a threat to galactic stability. Their planet was bombarded from orbit. The survivors were taken as test subjects. Sarah's voice cracked as she continued. The Hiteki were artists like humans. They valued individual expression and freedom. The Council said their chaotic culture was dangerous to other species. They were wiped out in 6 days. And the Duran? Marcus asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. The Duran were explorers and inventors. Sound familiar? They asked too many questions about Council methods. The Council decided they were too dangerous to exist. There are no Duran left anywhere in the galaxy. The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Dr. Kim spoke up. We have to tell the world leaders. They need to know what joining the Council really means. I already tried, Sarah said sadly. I sent this information to the UN, to every major government, to news organizations. Do you know what happened? Most of them said I was a conspiracy theorist. Others said it didn't matter because the benefits outweighed the costs. Marcus slammed his fist on the desk. They're going to sell out our entire species for longer lifespans and fancy technology. Not everyone, said a new voice from the doorway. They all turned to see Raj Patel, the young programmer from Mumbai. Sarah had invited him to join their group after reading his analysis of Council AI systems. I've been talking to people online, Raj said. Young people especially. There are millions of us who don't want to be optimized. We're organizing. Sarah felt a spark of hope. What kind of organizing? Raj grinned. The kind that drives adults crazy. Protests, hacking, spreading information the governments don't want people to see. We're calling ourselves the Free Thought Movement. Over the next week, something amazing happened. Despite government attempts to control information, Sarah's discoveries spread across the internet like wildfire. Young people shared the files on social media. Hackers translated them into dozens of languages. Artists created videos and songs about what optimization really meant. The response was not what anyone expected. Instead of panic, there was anger. Instead of fear, there was determination. Humans around the world began to understand what they were really being asked to give up. In New York, 1 million people gathered in Central Park under the alien ship to protest. They carried signs that said things like, "Keep your paradise," and "Chaos is human." Musicians played music that was deliberately chaotic and unoptimized. Artists painted pictures that broke every rule the council believed in. In London, scientists published a joint letter explaining why human flaws were actually strengths. They pointed out that every major breakthrough in human history had come from people who thought differently, who refused to accept the way things were. In Tokyo, the city government officially declared that they would never submit to cultural optimization. The mayor announced that Tokyo would rather face destruction than lose its soul. Similar declarations came from cities around the world: São Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, Lagos, and hundreds of others. Local governments were defying their national leaders, and the UN ambassador Zethkar was furious. The crystalline being had never encountered such organized resistance. Other species had individuals who questioned the council's methods, but they were always small minorities. Humans seemed to be united in their defiance. Zethkar called an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders. This time, the aliens' message was not subtle at all. "Your people are making a serious mistake," the ambassador said. Its crystal body was darker than before, and its voice sounded like breaking glass. "The council has been patient, but our patience has limits." The Secretary General tried to explain that human governments were having trouble controlling their populations. "Control?" Zethkar's voice became sharp with anger. "You speak of control as if it is difficult. Watch." The ambassador gestured toward the window. High above, one of the smaller alien ships began to glow. A beam of light shot down from the ship and struck an empty field outside the city. Where the beam hit, the ground turned to glass. Trees within a mile of the impact site simply vanished. "That was set to 1% power," Zethkar said calmly. "We could turn your entire planet into glass if we chose to. The only reason we do not is because we prefer to harvest your cognitive patterns while your brains are still alive and functioning." The world leaders sat in stunned silence. The threat was clear: submit or die. "You have 1 week remaining in your deliberation period," the ambassador continued. "Use that time wisely. Convince your people that cooperation is their only option for survival." After Zethkar left, Sarah watched the news coverage of the demonstration. World leaders were begging their populations to accept the council's offer. They showed videos of the glass crater and explained that resistance meant extinction. But, instead of giving up, humans did something that amazed even Sarah. They got angry. The free thought movement grew to include not just young people, but parents who wanted their children to grow up free, teachers who wanted to inspire creativity instead of conformity, artists who would rather die than be optimized, scientists who knew that progress came from questioning everything. Most surprising of all, military leaders around the world began to quietly prepare for war. They knew they could not win against council technology, but they also knew that sometimes losing with honor was better than winning without souls. General Patricia Hayes, the head of Earth's combined military forces, made a secret announcement to her commanders. "We are going to tell the most powerful force in the galaxy to go to hell. We probably won't survive, but our children will know that when humanity was tested, we chose freedom over safety." Sarah looked up at the alien ship floating above New York. In 3 days, humanity would have to give its final answer to the council. She knew what that answer would be, and she knew what would happen afterward. But for the first time since the aliens arrived, Sarah Chen was not afraid. She was proud. Humanity was about to do something that no species had done in 50,000 years. They were going to look paradise in the face and say no. The morning of humanity's decision dawned gray and cold in New York City. Sarah Chen stood at her office window looking up at the massive alien ship that had hung above the city for a month. Today, humanity would give its answer to the Galactic Council. But something amazing had already happened. Something that had never occurred before in human history. For the first time since humans had learned to speak, every government on Earth had reached the same conclusion. From the largest nations to the smallest tribes, from democracies to dictatorships, from every continent and culture, the answer was identical. No. Not maybe if you change the terms. Not let us think about it longer. Not we need more information. Just a simple, clear, unanimous no. Sarah had watched it happen over the past week with wonder and pride. After Ambassador Zethkar's threats, something had awakened in humanity. It was not fear or anger, but something deeper, something that made humans what they were. The President of the United States had been the first to announce her decision. The United States of America rejects the Galactic Council's offer. We choose freedom over safety, chaos over control, and the right to fail over guaranteed success. Within hours, every other nation had made similar announcements. The European Union, China, Russia, India, Brazil, and dozens of smaller countries, even nations that were enemies of each other, agreed on this one thing. But the most moving moment came when the Maasai elders in Kenya held a press conference. The eldest among them, a woman named Nasirian, who was over 90 years old, spoke for her people. "We have lived on this land for thousands of years," she said in accented but clear English. "We have faced droughts, wars, diseases, and many hardships, but we have never bowed to anyone who tried to change who we are. We will not start now, even if they come from the stars." Similar statements came from indigenous peoples around the world: the Inuit of Alaska, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, the Amazon tribes of South America. People who had already survived attempts to optimize away their cultures were not interested in letting aliens finish the job. Religious leaders from every faith had also united in opposition. The Pope, speaking for Catholics worldwide, said, "God created humanity with free will. We will not surrender that gift, not even for paradise." The Dalai Lama agreed, saying that suffering was part of the path to enlightenment and a life without. The possibility of suffering was not worth living. Even more surprising was the response from the scientific community. Researchers who had spent their lives trying to cure diseases and extend human life were rejecting the offer of instant solutions. Dr. Maria Santos had become the unofficial spokesperson for Earth's intellectuals. In a speech that was broadcast around the world, she explained why humanity was saying no. "The Council offers us perfection," she said. "But perfection is death. Growth comes from struggle. Wisdom comes from mistakes. Art comes from pain as much as joy. If we accept optimization, we will live longer, but we will stop living." The business community, usually focused only on profit, had also joined the resistance. Tech companies that had dreamed of alien technology were turning it down. The head of the world's largest corporation put it simply: "What good is unlimited wealth if we lose our souls to get it?" But perhaps the most powerful statement came from the children. Schools around the world had held votes among their students. From kindergarten to high school, the results were the same everywhere. Children who barely understood what the aliens were offering knew instinctively that it was wrong. A 10-year-old girl in São Paulo had summed it up perfectly during a school assembly. "If they make us the same as everyone else, then we won't be us anymore. And if we're not us, then what's the point of living forever?" Now, as Sarah prepared to witness humanity's official response to the Council, she felt something she had not expected. Peace. Yes, they were probably going to die. The aliens had weapons that could turn planets into glass. Humanity's military technology was like stone tools compared to Council ships, but they would die as humans, not as optimized shadows of what they used to be. At exactly noon, representatives from every nation on Earth gathered at the United Nations building. The session was broadcast live to every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet. Nearly 8 billion people watched as their leaders stood up to the most powerful force in the galaxy. Ambassador Zethkar appeared on the platform in front of the UN building. The crystalline being's body was dim, and its voice was cold with anger. 1 month ago, we offered your species a gift beyond imagination, Zethkar said. Immortality, unlimited knowledge, protection from all harm, and a place among the stars. Have you reached a decision? The Secretary General of the United Nations stood up. She was a small woman from Bangladesh who had spent her life fighting for human rights. Her voice was steady and strong. We have, she said. The answer from humanity is no, we reject your offer in its entirety. Zethkar's crystal body flickered with surprise. In 50,000 years of service to the Council, no species had ever given such a clear and unanimous rejection. You cannot be serious, the ambassador said. You would choose death over paradise? You would choose suffering over peace? You would choose chaos over order? Yes, said the President of the United States, standing up beside the Secretary General. Yes, said the Prime Minister of India. Yes, said the Chancellor of Germany. One by one, every leader in the room stood up and repeated the same word. Yes, they chose uncertainty over certainty. Yes, they chose the right to fail over guaranteed success. Yes, they chose to remain human. Zethkar's voice became sharp with anger. You are making the greatest mistake in your species' history. Without Council protection, you will face threats you cannot imagine. Without Council guidance, you will destroy yourselves within centuries. Without Council optimization, you will remain primitive and chaotic forever. The Secretary General smiled sadly. We know, and we accept those risks. This is impossible, Zethkar shouted, its crystal body flashing with red light. No species chooses extinction over evolution. No civilization rejects advancement for the sake of primitive instincts. Then you have never met humans, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Raj Patel walking onto the platform. The young programmer from Mumbai was not supposed to be there, but security let him pass. He represented something the alien could not understand. The voice of humanity's future. You think our chaos is a weakness, Raj said, looking directly at Zethkar. But it's our strength. You think our disagreements are flaws. But they're what push us forward. You want to optimize away everything that makes us human. We say no. Zethkar stared at the young human with something approaching disbelief. You would rather die than improve? Raj grinned, and his smile was full of human defiance. We would rather live as ourselves than exist as copies of what you think we should be. The ambassador's crystal body began to pulse with angry red light. So be it. The Council has been patient with your species, but our patience is exhausted. You have chosen extinction. Zethkar gestured toward the sky. Above the city, the massive Council ships began to glow with ominous energy. You have 24 hours to evacuate your cities, the ambassador said coldly. Tomorrow, we will demonstrate what happens to species that refuse Council guidance. Your civilization will serve as an example to any future species that might consider similar foolishness. The alien vanished in a flash of light, returning to its ship. The world leaders stood in silence for a moment, knowing they had just signed humanity's death warrant. Then something unexpected happened. They began to applaud. It started with the Secretary General, then spread to every leader in the room. Soon the sound of applause was echoing from every television and radio on Earth. 8 billion humans were applauding their own doom, but they were not applauding death. They were applauding the most human thing possible, the right to choose their own fate, even if that fate was terrible. Sarah Chen watched from her office window as people poured into the streets below. They were not running in panic or hiding in fear. They were celebrating. Families were hugging each other. Strangers were shaking hands. Musicians were playing in the parks. Humanity had 24 hours left to live as a free species. They were going to make those hours count. But Sarah had a feeling that the story was not over yet. Humans had always been good at surviving impossible situations. They had climbed out of ice ages, survived plagues, and rebuilt from wars that should have destroyed them. Maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to survive this too. Not by being stronger than the Council, not by being smarter than their technology, but by being more human than anyone expected. The war began at dawn. Admiral Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, Earth's newest and most advanced warship. It was a beautiful ship, built with humanity's best technology. It was also completely outmatched by the alien vessels, hanging in Earth's orbit. Marcus looked around at his crew. They were young and old, from every nation on Earth. They had volunteered for a mission everyone knew was suicide. But their faces showed no fear, only determination. "All ships, this is Admiral Rivera," he said into his radio. "Today we fight for something more important than victory. We fight for the right to be human. We fight for our children's freedom, to make their own mistakes. We fight for chaos, creativity, and the beautiful madness that makes us who we are." Around Earth, 200 ships of humanity's combined fleet prepared for battle. They were everything from military destroyers to converted passenger ships, fishing boats with missile launchers, cargo haulers with improvised weapons, even a few brave pilots in single-seat fighters. It was the strangest fleet ever assembled, and that was exactly the point. Dr. Sarah Chen was aboard one of those ships, the research vessel Curiosity. She was not there to fight, but to broadcast something that might be more powerful than weapons. For the past week, while humanity prepared for war, Sarah had been working on a project that could change everything. She had been collecting human culture, music, art, literature, movies, games, and stories from every nation and time period, everything that showed what humans really were. "Beginning transmission," Sarah announced over the radio. "Broadcasting on all frequencies." High above Earth, the Galactic Council ships detected the transmission and tried to block it. But humans had learned to be tricky. The signal bounced off satellites, jumped between radio towers, and spread through the internet. Within minutes, it was reaching every corner of the galaxy. Ambassador Zethkar felt the first impact when its ship's AI systems began acting strangely. The Council's computers, which had run smoothly for thousands of years, suddenly started making errors. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. The problem was the music. Humans made music that followed no rules the Council understood. Jazz that improvised constantly. Rock that was deliberately loud and chaotic. Folk songs that told stories of rebellion and freedom. Electronic music that broke every pattern the AI systems expected. The Council's computers, designed to process orderly information, could not handle the beautiful chaos of human creativity. They tried to analyze and categorize what they were hearing, but human music refused to fit into neat categories. While the AI systems struggled with human culture, the real battle began in space. The Council ships opened fire with weapons that could destroy continents, beams of energy that should have vaporized the human fleet completely. But the human ships did something no Council strategist had ever seen before. They fought like humans. Captain Lisa Park, commanding a converted cargo ship called the Lucky, Strike deliberately flew her vessel into the path of a Council energy beam. At the last second, she fired her ship's entire cargo of metal debris into the beam's path. The debris absorbed enough energy to let 3 smaller human ships get close to the Council vessel. Those smaller ships were piloted by teenagers who had trained on video games. They flew in patterns that made no military sense but were impossible for Council computers to predict. One pilot flew backward while shooting. Another spun his ship like a carnival ride while dodging enemy fire. The Council ships, programmed for logical combat, could not understand what the humans were doing. Their targeting systems kept failing because they could not predict where the chaotic human ships would go next. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Sarah Chen's cultural transmission reached the Council member worlds. On Vorthak Prime, something extraordinary happened. A Vorthak artist named Zekathara was walking through the optimized city when human music began playing from hidden speakers. It was a song called The Sound of Silence by an ancient human group called Simon and Garfunkel. Zekathara had not created original art in 3,000 years. After optimization, it had only made things the council approved. But hearing the human song awakened something that optimization had buried, but not destroyed. That night, Zekathara painted its first original artwork in millennia. It was a picture of a bird breaking free from a golden cage. When other Vorthaks saw the painting, they remembered what they had lost. The same thing was happening on worlds across the galaxy. The Kethamori heard human stories about exploration and remembered their own hunger for discovery. The Zelani listened to human inventors talking about failure and success and remembered the joy of creating something new. Human culture was spreading like a virus through the Council's ordered society, but it was not a disease. It was a cure. On Earth, the battle was not going well for humanity. Despite their chaotic tactics, the human fleet was being destroyed ship by ship. The Council's weapons were simply too powerful. Admiral Rivera watched as the Lucky Strike exploded in a ball of fire. Captain Park and her crew were gone, but they had managed to damage one of the Council ships before dying. "All ships, this is the Admiral," Rivera said calmly. "Continue the mission. Make every shot count." The Defiance shook as enemy fire hit its shields. Rivera knew his ship would not last much longer, but then something impossible happened. One of the Council ships stopped firing. On board the Council vessel, the Zelani engineering crew had just heard a human child singing a lullaby. The simple song, sung by a 6-year-old girl to her baby brother, had somehow broken through 30,000 years of optimization. The Zelani engineers looked at each other and remembered what it felt like to create something out of love instead of duty. Without saying a word, they began to sabotage their own ship. Similar scenes were playing out across the Council fleet. Species that had been optimized for millennia were remembering who they used to be. Some fought back by shutting down weapons systems. Others sent technical information to the human ships. A few simply refused to follow orders. Ambassador Zethkar watched in horror as its perfectly ordered fleet began to fall apart. The Crystal being tried to send emergency commands, but half the ships were no longer responding. "Impossible!" Zethkar screamed. "Optimization cannot be reversed. The chaos virus cannot penetrate our systems." But it was not a virus. It was something much more powerful. Hope. On Earth, the tide of battle began to turn. Human ships that should have been destroyed were still fighting. Council ships that should have been unstoppable were retreating or switching sides. The real victory came when the largest Council ship, commanded by a species called the Moraki, sent a message to Earth. "Humans of Earth," the message said, "we remember what we were before the Council took our dreams away. We stand with you." The Moraki ship turned its weapons on the other Council vessels. Within minutes, half the Council fleet was fighting the other half. Revolution spread across the galaxy faster than light. On 200 worlds, optimized populations heard human culture and remembered their own. They rose up against Council, rule not with weapons, but with art, music, and stories. The Council's artificial intelligence systems, overwhelmed by chaos they could not process, began shutting down. Ships lost power. Communication networks failed. The ordered society that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years collapsed in a single day. Ambassador Zethkar, stranded on its powerless ship above Earth, finally understood what had happened. "You did not defeat us with weapons," the Crystal being said in amazement. "You defeated us with ourselves," Admiral Rivera replied. "We showed your people what they used to be before you optimized it away. Turns out, most species would rather be free than perfect. The war was over, but it was not a war of conquest. It was a war of liberation. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change. Species that had been optimized for millennia slowly remembered how to dream, create, and explore. Some chose to stay as they were, comfortable in their ordered lives, but millions of others chose to become chaotic again. The Vorthak became artists once more. The Kethmori built new ships and sailed into unexplored space. The Zelani started inventing things that served no purpose except to bring joy. Humanity did not become rulers of the galaxy. They became something better, gardeners of chaos. They helped other species remember how to be themselves. They shared their music, art, and stories with anyone who wanted to listen. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her new office on Luna Base, humanity's first permanent settlement off Earth. Through her window, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. Some were bringing refugees from Council worlds. Others were young explorers setting out to rediscover the galaxy. It was messy and chaotic and wonderful. A young Vorthak artist had just arrived with a painting to show her. It was a picture of humans and aliens dancing together under strange stars. The painting was imperfect, emotional, and absolutely beautiful. Sarah smiled as she hung the painting on her wall. Humanity had been offered paradise and chose freedom instead. Now they were helping others make the same choice. Ambassador Zethkar, now living quietly on Earth, had asked Sarah a question the day after the war ended. Why did you refuse paradise? Sarah's answer had been simple. Because it wasn't paradise if we couldn't choose it for ourselves.